All right, folks, we are live. We are back at the event. I'm just going to put in the overall event chat that the grant panel is starting for everyone. Once again, thank you, everyone. We are going to bleed into the lunch by like 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll still be starting lunch back up, or like I guess the conference, from lunch at 1:15. My name's Darren. Just going to do a quick wave and then turn off the video just because the internet and Flagstaff is a little nuts. I do have Lily next to me here, a beautiful dog that is virtually sinking in. She's been not that needy right now, so that's good. So I want to let everyone know that grants are an opportunity for your organization, and thank you for tuning in. The goal of this is for you to know how to identify and find grants, as well as then the goal of the overall panel is for you to understand as a farmer or food producer kind of the challenges, the opportunities that you can actually go through when it comes to submitting a grant. So a very basic way of identifying these grants is just through random Google searching. I know it sounds very basic, but Google is a friend, and there's a lot of basic keywords that you can put if you have a project idea or if there's an organization that you're interested in finding. You just kind of put their name into a search and you just follow the links. Also very useful is reading blogs and articles that specifically list grants. There are a lot of blogs that will talk about veteran serving grants or women owned businesses or Black and Indigenous peoples of color grants specifically. So you can look at it through multiple lenses, whether it be an idea, a keyword, who your organization is or how you are. There's a lot of these funding opportunities. And then you also want to look at the governmental agencies that serve you. So I did forget to write in here, tribal. There are a lot of tribal nations in Arizona specifically that have a lot of programs. With this RFPP overall organization, we haven't really dived into those grants or those programs, nor have I with my consulting business, but we do have a lot of federal funding with the USDA. There's also some state opportunities. Counties sometimes will have opportunities for you to access grants or funds, as well as cities and even regions. And so, for example, we have in Flagstaff a incubator entrepreneurship center that has grants that you can access and programs and funding. And so it's very important to kind of look at where you live and who services you. Not every governmental agency has funding, but one thing I tell people to do is to look at being creative. You don't necessarily have to do a grant, but you could potentially find access to a agricultural workforce development through the economic development of your organization or city. And since you're a farmer and you have a job that you're looking to fill, you can be a part of that program. When it comes to identification, you also want to look at different organizations that will serve you as a farm. So are you looking for a nonprofit? Like in Arizona, we have the Arizona Community Foundation, also in Flagstaff Food Link. We also have different organizations that can support you in corporate foundations. Cliff Bar, for example, has a very awesome foundation grant for nonprofits that are providing for healthier food systems, and it provides money for operational costs. And that is very important to realize, is that when you're looking for funding, they don't always give you money for just anything. It's usually a specific area or a specific need. Additionally, there's corporate foundations will provide funding for people that use their services. So if you use FedEx, for example, as a business, they actually have a $50,000 grant going in the next week or two. They're going to be closing it, but you can apply for it as a FedEx user. And then if your organization or business is chosen, you win a $50,000 cash reward, as well as other opportunities. Then you also want to look at national organizations, regional organizations, groups that you might not normally think about, but groups that maybe are coalitions of young farmers, for example, or if you're someone that works with animals, there's actually a organization that provides funding for you to build out better pasture for your animals. Because they care about the animal welfare, there's funding for those kind of things. So once again, it's really important to identify who you are as an organization on a bunch of different levels, and then trying to figure out if you can find funding that way. And then, like I had mentioned earlier, there are organizations that specifically fund veteran farmers people of color and Black and Indigenous farmers, women-owned businesses. And then there's even organizations that overlap. For example, Visa has a grant for Black women-owned businesses. And so once again, identifying funding sources is really important, but identifying who you'd like to associate with as an organization. There are, organizations that provide money that you might not want to work with. Now, the next step when you identify grants is to identify what you can get money for. And so this can happen in two major threads. One is matching your projects to grants. So, for example, if you are doing animal welfare upgrades, the FACTS Animal Welfare Grant is one that you would want to funnel and write for. If you wanted to have a hoop house, which I think both of the next speakers on this panel have actually had access to, the NRCS has funding directly for you to build certain projects. And then if you wanted to say solar panels, there are some organizations, private mainly, that do offer things for energy, as well as there are some USDA rural development farmer solar energy grants. But once again, that's matching the project to your overall grant that you're seeking. Then the other way, which is the vice versa, is you are matching your grant to the project. And so, for example, if you wanted to write a grant for Western SARE, which is part of the USDA, you need to have research and education built into your grant. And so that is where the grant will more broadly define what your project does. It doesn't necessarily say you do a specific project, but it says that you have to do something in addition to your project. And once again, it would be research and education. Another organization or another grant that could fund you is, say, a veteran supporting organization. There's several that I've worked with that they don't really have any requirements. They just give you X amount of money and you use that for whatever you need. And that could be equipment upgrades. And that's, once again, very important, is that when you look for a grant is to look at the eligibility. And so when you're going through your grants, you want to make sure that you're writing really good notes. You're identifying key deadlines. You're identifying the eligibility of both the organization as well as the money that you're looking to get. Are there any budget restrictions? Additionally, several grants will require matching funds or proof of matching funds or some kind of buy-in, which is very important. Additionally, they do ask for timelines and do ask you to have good documentation for your grant. And so when it comes to reviewing the sections of grants, there's typically a lot of areas that they ask you to write, but the most common ones that I've seen for grants is, what is the project description that you're looking to get funding for? Provide a background of the applicant for the grant, provide a budget, and this budget is very diverse, and some organizations ask you just to do a line-by-line item. Other groups ask for a very well-documented expenditure report, as well as a justification with your budget. And so you need to be very clear on what area of the grant they're asking and what kind of material they're asking. Additionally, there's a lot of project timelines. Grants are very directed on timelines, and they can be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. Very rarely is it given with no timeline at the end. And they do expect usually a final report or some kind of documentation through the timeline and through the project. Additionally, they usually will ask for a project narrative. So not just a brief description, but what are you actually doing? Provide the ins and the outs. The word count is very important. You really don't want to submit a grant with only half the words submitted. They do provide you that large amount on purpose. They do want you to use it. But also, if you're finding that you're being very repetitive and just doing a lot of reiterating of the same thing, that might not be the best idea either. So once again, carefully read through the document to identify what the grant exactly wants or will fund. Create a separate document to write your answers. A lot of times there will be these online portals and different application processes, and you really want to have everything you've written on a separate document so that nothing gets erased. Make sure it's all saved. And then really make sure that you have proper grammar. It's very easy if you use spell check, as well as you can get the free version of Grammarly. you don't want the grammar to be the reason why you don't get the funding. There are organizations that do say that grammar and punctuation and things like that do not matter. So once again, be aware that organizations do have different standards for submission practices. Also, you really want to have all of your material done the day before. Always plan for technological issues as well as the internet having issues. And you really don't want the reason why you don't get funding to be because of a technicality that could have been controlled. And so always try to plan to have an early deadline for yourself. And then also look to create supplemental documents if you're allowed. Some grants say that you can add things. I highly recommend it. Also, some organizations say these are optional, so it doesn't hinder you. I, once again, try to shy on the side of giving more information, which can help them build a greater idea of what you're trying to do, a vision, pictures of the farm, of the business plan, or of the products that you're going to buy. If you're going to buy equipment, you want to maybe have that attached on a budget explanation. So those are the main things that I wanted to address, and wanted to now turn some time over to our next speakers. We have Andrea, who's going to be talking about some grants and her organization, and then Rylan, who will be talking about some other grants. My name's Darren. Once again, please feel free to reach out to me. I do have a booth. You can reach out to me. I unfortunately am moderating throughout the event today, and so I might not get to you until a day or two after this through my consulting page. So thank you again, everyone, for listening in. And Andrea, I'm going to switch over to your PowerPoint.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Darren. All right, hello everyone. I am Andrea McAdow. I am up in the Kingman area and I own Rosebud Farms. We are a small farm and also a food aggregator of regional foods, vegetables, but also value-added products and meat. We have a storefront in downtown Kingman here, and we also do some home delivery. So we've been able to collaborate with a lot of people, and grants have been a big part of our business model over the past couple of years, especially going into the pandemic. So some of my tips and things to think about when you're writing a grant, it's really important to identify your key partnerships. Think about the people you've worked with and who can help contribute to your project, who have a similar mission as you, and you're also serving some of their goals. So think about really trying to write into your narrative about who the project benefits. So the people in your community. It's really great if you can have some specific demographics and data on those people as well. It's also great if your partners have reach and influence and can help spread information about your project. Certain projects do like to see that you're able to distribute the information that you've learned, so that, especially USDA grants, they're funding information so that they can better, our food supply system throughout the country. Another important thing is to identify a need and a niche. So you don't really want to just go in there and just do something because you want to. It's important to kind of match up your need with the goals of the grant as well. So yeah, identifying a need. So for example, in our community, there was a great need for delivery during the pandemic. And so with our LFPP, that was something we were able to address. And there wasn't really home delivery of good food. So that was something we kind of poked at and applied for in that grant. Another thing to consider is how you're going to measure success. So when you're writing the grant, you want to be able to say like, hey, we're going to incrementally improve this certain situation. Again, going back to the data, knowing what your starting point is, and then knowing how you're going to increase that and having kind of a stepwise plan for that is really important. And finding supporting data for your claims. So you can potentially look for studies out there, different economic reports on your area. Those are great for helping defend your point when you are looking to write a grant. That's it's just something to show that there is actually the need there. And that's something they do really like to see. Next, please. So having your ducks really important, especially with government grants, things like the USDA, Agricultural Marketing Service. They're definitely more advanced and involved than some other smaller grants. So it's important to realize it's not, you know, it's not just free money. You have to definitely work for what you're doing, and you have to have a plan, and you also have to be a good steward of the financial backing that they're giving you. So they'll ask you for financial procedures and how you go about tracking everything, how you go about paying your people, that sort of thing. So it's good to consider, maybe talk to an accountant, a lawyer, something like that. So you just keep that in your mind. If you are going after these big grants, you'll want to have a plan for how you will handle the funds and keep track of everything. And it's also good to note that it can be a pretty time consuming thing. So when you're writing a grant, taking that into consideration is just the grant management portion of it. If you have to have funding for that in the grant, it's good to just know that off the bat. Also having a plan for cash flow management. A lot of grants can be reimbursement based. So the money will come out of your pocket and you will have to request reimbursement. It's important that the things you're spending money on are approved, because they won't approve things that, you know, they said were okay to begin with. So really important. And sometimes things can be changes in software or something. So potentially, you know, weeks where you won't get a reimbursement right away. So just things to be aware of, especially then things like the NRCS. There are some programs, I think, for beginning disadvantaged farmers where you can get some upfront, but it is also you complete the project and then they reimburse you for the cost of everything. So just have a plan for your cash flow, so you don't get in there and get super stressed. And then allowable versus non-allowable. When you're writing the grants, keep that in mind. They'll usually have a line of, you know, what you can and can't spend money on. So pay attention to that. You don't want to write a grant that's asking for all this money for construction and they don't allow it. Like, that's just gonna set you back to begin with. So just pay attention to that. And then as you're going through the grant, if you have to do any amendments, be aware that, like, just have that on your radar, that what is and what isn't allowable. That's very important if you want to get paid. And tracking metrics of success, like we said, how are you going to measure success? How are you going to track them throughout? So one of us is our project reach. So one thing we do is measure our social media reach, and then also the people who come into our physical storefront. And that's something that's just built into our system already, where we can see how many people cashed out in a day or month or year. So that is, it makes it easier if you do something that's already built into your systems. Surveys too, if you plan to do, have very specific questions that you're trying to show as your metrics, make sure you're crafting your survey questions to get those answers you need, and think about how you're going to distribute them to get a good amount of answers back. Next, please. Your ducks in a row. So sticking to your financial plan, like I said, your management of your money, that document that they'll have you write at the beginning, that's super important. So you're following, like I said, they want a good financial steward. So it'll give you a lot less grief if you just, you know, make sure you're keeping your time in order. And then also keeping yourself on a regular schedule is very helpful. It can be stressful for both yourself and for your grant manager who's reviewing all your stuff. If, you know, you wait a whole year before sending something in, it's going to take a lot more time and you're more apt to make mistakes and forget things. So just keeping that regular schedule is helpful. And then keeping records of your work. So taking lots of photos and taking notes, and that makes your end of year reporting much simpler. So you don't have to go back and be like, oh man, what did I do? And did we actually do this? And like, how do we have proof that we did it? So it's really good to have that all keeping track of it throughout the year so that it makes life super easy at the end. And then, yeah, and keep tracking your metrics of success at set intervals. So we do our surveys once a year, and that just we know we have it on our calendar when we need to have them. That's very helpful as well. Next, please. So we've had a handful of grants so far. Our big one right now is the local food promotion program. So that was expanding our aggregation and distribution capabilities, farmer outreach and education. So summits like this that we've been working on with NAU to help get people education on marketing and growing and all that good stuff. Also, helping the producers that we work with help market their produce and goods throughout our region. And specifically not for was for production. So we were able to fund a wash pack where we were able to take goods and produce in from the farmers we work with and take our orders from our customers, pack them all up and distribute them from there. And it's been pretty great. So we've been making a lot of growth, and we're doing some now renovations at our shop downtown to help make that more efficient for getting food out to people. So we've been able to reach quite a few new communities in our area, being Mojave County is an extremely rural place, very spread out. So yeah, if anyone has questions specific to the LFPP, feel free to ask me about that. And then I know NRCS is a big one. The EQIP high tunnel one is big for food producers. So we're just starting our first one with that, and we are building those out right now. But that one is a reimbursement one, so you pay for it up front, and then once you're all done, they'll come and check it out. I think Rylan maybe can speak to this more. I'm not sure if you've gone through the whole process yet, but yeah, and so we've gotten a few others and some that were private grants. We've gotten an American Express grant that was like very low key they just kind of give you funds and don't really follow up at all, to the LFPP, which is you're doing tons of documentation and really staying on things, and there's tons of procedure. So they can really span different levels of intensity. So keep that in mind, how much time you actually have to do this versus what you want to accomplish. So yeah, just know it is work to do these things as well. There's a lot of documentation and things to think through. So yeah, next please. And then yeah, keeping your momentum going. It may be difficult to get started, especially as you're a younger business and maybe you haven't gotten so many grants. It's hard. Can be hard to kind of prove yourself at first, but as you work through and get feedback on your grants, it becomes, what to start hitting on. And that becomes very helpful as you go. And keep track of your success as you go. It's always good to kind of have your resume as you're going through things and writing these grants. Like Darren said, they'll probably have you give your background a little bit. And then building relationships with your grant manager. They're there to help. It's always great to ask questions, so you know what you're supposed to be doing and not just guessing, because government things can be a little bit tricky with some of the wording they put things. So it's good to have an interpreter there for you. And then reaching out to consultants like Darren, who I've worked with for a few years now. They're great if you need help getting started. If you really want to do some things to get some funding but not sure where to start, they will be a good place, and they can help you write your grants and kind of figure out partnerships and a good angle to take. And yeah, relationships and partnerships are really essential. It's good to find your niche and be of service. It's a lot of these grants are looking for how you're promoting your community, not just your own business, like how you're bringing people together and progressing all of the food supply system. So yeah, so that's another thing to really consider as you're developing your strategy. Next, please. Yeah, there's my contact information if you guys have questions. May take me a minute or two to get back, but you can also reach me on Instagram too at Rosebird Farms.
Awesome. Thank you. Everyone. Andrea is an amazing person to work with. She's a problem solver. It's really fun when you meet food producers that had a previous life, to say it best. But with that, everyone reach out to Andrea at her booth or through an email. Once again, she lives and works in Kingman. So if you've ever wanted to visit that part of the state, she has a really cool farm, and it's really growing and developing. Speaking of a growing and developing farmer operation, we have Rylan here. And Rylan, we're just going to let you dive into it so that everyone knows on the call and on the summit, we are going to have the lunch pushed back a little bit to where we're going to have our roundtable start at 1:30. So it'll just be a 10-minute pushback, and we do apologize for that. But with our technical stuff, it's best for us to give ourselves a little bit of time. And so with that, we're going to have Rylan speak for the next 10 minutes. We're going to have a 5-minute Q&A on grants. And then after that, we're going to turn it into a lunch/networking. So you can go to booths. If you have your lunch in front of you, you can reach out to people. But we wanted to give our food producers a break in the day if they need to go check on the animals or water the plants. Take it away, Ryan.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to follow those two presentations because I think that was a very well coverage of grant cycle. But I'll kind of run through it from my perspective as a farmer, and then I also have a couple other I might spend more time on about bringing additional to the farm. So yeah, with that, I'm Rylan with Forestdale Farm. We're located in Flagstaff, Arizona, and we're a small family run. Next slide. So yeah, so what I'm going to talk about is the grants, which was pretty well covered, managing. I'll also dive into diversifying the farm, different ways of sales and production for small farmers, and how to gain their farming operation. Next slide. So a little bit first just about our farm. Our community with produce that's organically, ecologically, and sustainably grown. We value water conservation, biodiversity, and healthy soil. We grow mostly vegetables. We focus a lot on leafy green production, but we also do poultry. We have pharmacy items, which I'll talk about. We do garden starts, compost, things related to our operation. And we sell we have a farm stand. We do CSA farm shares, and we sell as well as to local stores and different restaurants. Next. So yeah, a lot of this, again, I'll breeze through this. I'll kind of just try to touch on some points that weren't covered. But the key when I'm looking for a grant is I'm sort of looking at what are at that point and what the farm needs or what was difficult the season before. And there's kind of grants that I've sort of dived into: infrastructure grants, and then more community need grants, and then research grants. So the picture on the bottom right, Andrea talked about that's a picture of a high tunnel grant that we got through the NRCS, which was great because growing in Flagstaff, right now I'm looking out the window and there's snow, and it's just, yeah, total. So that grant production early in the season as well as late in the season. It's really expanded our operation and allowed us to grow in these difficult times with weather patterns. Other thing is community need. So we've got a grant from Flagstaff Food Link, which was also mentioned, with low income access to food. So we started where we had discounted CSA shares and we would offer to the community to kind of help gain that access across that barrier. And then grants, those are more kind of intensive grants. They take a lot more accounting and work, but they're real great for the picture on the above right is a research grant that we got, the SARE grant, the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, and that preservation with aquaponics and aquaculture. So we looked at different yields with adding these fish into the system for feed grain production as well as seedling starts. And so, yeah, next slide. All right, so this part, I skipped most of this. I think this was covered, but I agree with Darren. I when I wrote it on the slide, I thought it was a little weird to just be like research. That's the best way to sort of dive into the grants. And there's always new grants popping up, so you want to really sort of browse what you're looking for. Of opportunity out there, and you can kind of narrow it down. Again, the local agencies. I think is to make sure like your grant that you're applying is a good fit for what you want to do. You don't want to just be trying to fit an idea to a whole bunch of different grants and applying to a whole bunch. You want to kind of find the grant that fits your, really focus on that. And like the two presenters before me said, writing grants, take the time, be very thorough. Anything they ask for, make sure you provide. Panel this year for the Western research grants, and just have proposal was kind of key in a lot of the determining factors. If it's not clear and you're not providing the budget and everything they ask for, it kind of will get your grant pushed aside. And again, managing grants. Andrea said this, which is a perfect way to say it. It's not free money. It is a lot of work. So if you get the time to do it, the growing season, you're already really strapped for time. So do you have the time to actually complete that project and the skills and the expertise? So, think about it, execute the grant and complete it in a timely manner, because it does get a little hectic, and everything always is more work than you initially imagined. Next slide. All right. So, I'll just touch on some things outside of grants to bring money to the farm. A lot of it is, you don't just focus on one type of production. You can look at vegetable, eggs, meat. There's different types of sales, different types. So the more like you can diversify your farm, the more you can, so you can stay farming and stay in business. And then what we've done on a lot of our farm is looked at what we need for our production, and then that need into additional income. So the next slides will kind of offer some examples that we've done. So next slide. So one example need would be soil fertility. All farms have this issue. Basically, you want to make the crop out of the soil and you're selling it. You want to be able to add nutrients back into the soil, keep the microbes, everything happy. So one that is, where you need to add compost back to the operation. So to keep it a closed loop, we have a lot of poultry that we do on the farm. This allows us excess waste on the farm, produce that we're not able to sell, or after harvesting, whatever's left over, we can have the chickens forage through, and that in return comp to the farm. And again, all of that adds another source of income, because you can sell eggs, you can sell meat, you could sell, which we've done. We've had turkeys hatch out eggs, and we're able to the eggs and the birds as they hatch out. So all of that's kind of important to look at it. Do to your farm every year. Eliminate that or reduce the costs. It'll really help your production as well. Next slide. Example is seedling production on our farm. We do a lot of transplanting, a lot of seedlings, and we sort of over the years just started selling. It's actually a big part of our spring business. So we have a garden start CSA that we run, where we offer seedling shares in the spring for home gardeners. If anyone's interested in that too, there's more information on our website about it. we do markets with seedlings, we do events, we do farm sales. Like one thing we were doing on the farm already that we expanded into kind of another sales opportunity, and it's been really good, especially at the beginning of the season, to kind of push seedling sales. Next slide. And then demand too. It's also good to look at, especially in your current business. So if you're doing farmers markets or you're selling wherever you're selling, you have a storefront and you're selling there. If you notice a demand that you can fill in that market, for example, we have a pharmacy kind of line that we do where we produce all these products on the farm, but we do homemade deodorants. And we're able to sell those at the community markets where we're already selling produce. So it kind of just opens another avenue. We're already there selling produce, but we're able to produce on the farm as well. So it's always good to look at demand. And if there's anything you see at any of your areas where your production and your farm's profitability as well. Next slide. And then it's good to look at the biggest expenses on your farm, which can be, for seedling mix in the beginning of the season. In bulk, the ingredients that we use for our seedling mix and on the farm, we're able to sell that seedling mix to other home gardeners and people for the cost of purchasing that. And another example, chicken feed. So organic chicken feed is just insanely expensive. So kind of a co-op situation where we purchase a lot of the chicken feed at once in bulk, and we have other people in the community order, and it reduces the shipping cost on it, so we can all get it for cheaper, and it makes it a little more easy for the whole community to use organic eggs or different animal production. Next slide. So the biggest, the other way to bring income to your farm, the grants are great. All the stuff we talked about are great, but to sort of look at what obstacles you have on your farm and how you can use that knowledge. Can you market that knowledge? So an example, conservation, we're not tied to city. We don't have a consistent water source, so we do a lot of rainwater catchment, drip irrigation, mulching. We're real cautious of our water usage, and anything that we've kind of learned from that, we're able to turn into workshops. We can do tours. We can, help spread that information, and that also creates another way to get people to the farm and as well. Next slide. All right, and again, I didn't go too much into the grants. I think that was well covered, but it's definitely worth pursuing the grants, especially if you, there's a lot of infrastructure grants, and there's a lot of grants for research and just community development and different things like that. So I think, just looking at your whole, what's best suited for it, and really, putting the time into it is going to guarantee your success in those grants. And with that, if anyone, our website's up there, my email's up there. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and our CSAs are open. So if you're interested and you're in the Flagstaff community, feel free to reach out. And thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So with that, we will take questions for 5 minutes until 12:40. And then if not, we will end this panel early, but we do have a question or two. One's for Andrea. What did the American Express grant entail?
I want to say we got that one, I think in 2020, but it was through Main Street America. So it was the National Main Street Organization, which helps support, small rural downtowns. And I wrote it specifically for our shop space. So it was a grant application just talking about what we wanted to do and how we're going to improve the space for the community, which we're still working on. We had some hiccups along the way, like a monsoon that took down a tree and crushed our awning. But anyway, besides the point. Once we were awarded, it was really just, that was a simple one. They gave us the funds and we were just able to use them to improve our space back there. And there wasn't a whole bunch of back and forth.
Awesome. One question, it was from speaker about a veteran, if equipment upgrades also included newly disabled or new disability for military injury. To answer that, each of the veteran serving grants I've looked at have different requirements and different allowances. Some of them are interested in your military service pertaining to like where you served, if you had injuries. There's very, very specific grants to very like open and broad. And so that can be something kind of discussed if anyone's interested in that. We do have, Tina wanted to say, great idea. Good job for the bulk buying and offering it to the community for Rylan. In our chat, we do have everyone's information for Rylan and for Andrea. And then you can visit their booths as well. So let us know if anyone has any other questions. We'll wait another 30 seconds to see if questions come through. And then if not, we can adjourn for lunch. We do have one question. This is from Eric. Why not create a co-op system with local growers rather than trying to do it all on your farm? And I guess that's for both Rylan and Andrea.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So for me, basically, the farming operation is my. Else is kind of just a side in addition to that. So for me, if I'm ordering food, for our chickens on our that anyways. So I'm looking at ways of I can expand that and have other people come when I get these big orders and pick up at our farm. So the main thing that I'm into is farming, and everything else is sort of a byproduct of that. And it's really hard to do. I'm assuming you're talking about a larger co-op. Maybe Andrea can speak more to that because that might be more in her realm.
Oh, I mean, we haven't really looked at specifically buying supplies in as a co-op. I mean, it might be cool, but we are all very, very spread out. If you're in northern Arizona, it's a pretty far drive from one to another. So, but we are building connections. So there may be opportunity for that in the future where we can have an easier back and forth with things like soil and all that and feed and all that. So, yeah.
And then there are organizations that I think are noticing the need for some of these maybe more larger, maybe not necessarily cooperative models, but ways of collaborating and larger umbrella organizations that can kind of help individuals that are busy, because we do know that our food producers are doing 20 different jobs, and that just kind of adds a whole nother layer. But that's where I think it's important that for a successful and thriving food system, we have organizations, nonprofits, for-profit, kind of working in conjunction together to kind of bring about a larger, healthier system. And that's why we're glad that this summit kind of is partnering all these different entities and organizations and industries that are kind of bringing that about. So thank you, everyone, for your questions and your answers. We will do a break until